Hello and welcome to this edition of the Sparx Tribune Report. My name is Devin Jones, and joining me this evening is an activist and a writer. She is the editor of the International Affairs for Progressive Army and a member of its editorial board. Ms. Pamela Getz, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite all right. I wanted to talk to you about identity politics. I noticed you wrote an article about that in the Progressive Army.
Yes,
And
yes. I think it's a very important topic to get into because it's not something you can just kind of talk about on the surface and skip over it. It's a very deep subject.
right, and you kind of gave me a bit of a different perspective on it as well. Considering I hadn't always been very, friendly to the term identity politics. But with that being said, like you seem to describe a bit of a nuance with regard to your perspective on what identity politics is between that article and the next article that you wrote for the same outlet, Progressive Army, where you talk about Liam Neeson and his admission, crazy confession of his and such. But the way that you worded some of your points in that article seem to echo back to that same nuanced perspective. So I wanted to like ask so from your what is identity politics to you?
Well, one, everyone has an identity, whether we call it that or not. We have a way that we shape who we are, and we have words to describe that. Everyone has an identity, whether it's mother, father, worker, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But when we start getting into the politics portion of it, we have to look at it in groups of who's being served and who's not being served by the government.
Okay.
So that's where my perspective comes in, is that we can have really good identity politics where we make sure that, underserved communities, the poor, the Black community, the LGBTQ community, all those people are having their needs met and that they have the same rights as everyone else.
Yeah.
But we can have a very dangerous, negative identity politics where we have to vote, all women have to vote for some politician running because she's female.
Mm-hmm.
All Black people have to vote for someone because they're Black. And that is detrimental to the term identity politics. So we have to be careful about which one we're talking about when we're saying we need to remove identity politics.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, that kind of gets to one thing I wanted to mention because the U.S. seems to be amidst an escalating culture war, and sensitivities are rising on all sides and such, and to dig into the layers of what identity politics is kind of echoes back to what you're saying right there, and I'm not sure I have the words to describe it effectively at the moment, but that because sensitivities are so high culturally and ethnically and such, identity politics appeals, and but because of that is used by the establishment, you know, to appeal yet.
Right. Well, and what happens is, and it's been going on for years, it's nothing new. We just start finding terms for the things that have happened, and we're starting to break those terms down and those situations down into smaller and smaller fractions, which I think is good for deeper understanding. But if you have, let's say, the Democrats go to a Black neighborhood only once every 4 years, they go to church, they sing some hymns, they go and have dinner, and then you don't see them for another 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of this bad identity politics. They are just playing to the crowd for votes.
And 9 times out of 10, they don't even live in those communities anyway, or live near those communities, or even have the experiences or share the experiences of said community.
Correct. And they don't go there any other time. They don't even do paperwork, so to speak, to make sure that those communities are served. It's all lip service.
Mm-hmm.
But they come to depend on those people to bolster the vote. And I think that's what blew up in 2016. People start demanding more than just a 4-year visit. They want to see some paying for. We've been giving you our vote. So what are we getting in return for that?
Okay.
And so that's where we have that divide that we need to work on, because if we don't have identity politics, we can't define who's not getting the services that they need, who's not being taken care of.
Okay, could I?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to throw it, like, with regard to that one particular point. What would you say to someone who would argue that if you were to level the economic playing field, that it would solve a lot of the causal the symptoms that stem from economic inequality in the first place, like a lot of the lines that would otherwise be drawn on ethnic or cultural, racial lines, could be solved if the economic playing field itself were leveled off. So what would you say to someone who argues against, identity politics on the basis of more of a class warfare?
Well, I think we have to look at it as both. And just the simplest example that I can give is, if you pay Black men, Black women the same thing that their counterparts are getting paid, everybody's being paid equally, that's great. But if somebody doesn't get the job because they're Black, it doesn't affect them anyway. So it has to be, we have to address the racial part of it and the financial part of it. We can't just say, well, if we fix economics, that's going to take care of it all.
Well,
so we have to see, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask. So what would you say would be left hanging or left undone if we were to accomplish certain things that would level the economic playing field, like raising the wage to $15 an hour and Medicare for all, and things that would disproportionately benefit those who had disproportionately been disbenefited before? Like, what would be left hanging after that would not be addressed from an identity perspective?
Right. So, again, if your pay is equal, but if you never did the job, that doesn't become relevant to you. Just because you are making sure that everyone has Medicare for all doesn't address the fact that doctors treat Black patients differently than they do white patients. So we have to address racism because it is an underpinning of a lot of beliefs that people have. So it's gonna be a mental task mostly, because you can't legislate morality.
Yeah.
But we have to do what we can as close as possible, like with the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
We also have. I'm sorry.
I was going to say another thing that came to mind when you said that was the situation with police officers and the embedded systemic racism there.
Right.
Yeah,
having a financial, if the police officers can attack a $1 million or a millionaire football player, or someone in a limo and thinks they're in the wrong car in the wrong neighborhood.
Yeah.
Them having equal pay and equal, medical care and education doesn't play into that situation.
Okay.
So those are the sort of things that'll get left out. And with racism, we have to really start very young. I don't really have a plan for how we make older people who are set in their ways of being understand. But we have to start with a younger generation. We have to start, kindergarten, elementary school, with better. That's where the education comes in, where you're going to make sure that you spread out that education among all races, among all genders, not just this homogenous education that we get now.
Certainly.
And we've got to build all the way up through, so that we're 30 years from now, then we have a situation where people understand equality naturally. It's not something that's going to have to be explained to them, because they will have already experienced it as a It's just how things are, as opposed to something they have to unlearn and learn something new.
Yeah, worldview. Yeah, worldviews are acquired. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said worldviews are acquired. I was agreeing with you.
Right, and if you make sure you're educating across the board in making sure that the materials for each school, that's when the financial part will come into it. But if we have kids that still leave, they all have beautiful schools that are, they have the same textbook, you're still going to have racism. And then those kids grow up to be police officers and doctors, and that still have these biases.
Hello, are you there?
It's very nuanced. I mean, if you've got Klan, raising their children to be Klan, you're probably not going to convince them otherwise. And there's, nothing we can do about that. Hopefully someone has as if they come to Jesus moment, but that's not something we're going to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Those little biases of, well, I didn't think there were any black philosophers or astronomers or, until the 19th century. And then you go back and you look at, if you know to look, we have all this information available to us. They're out there, but why aren't they in our school books?
Could I ask a question though? Going back to the criminal justice reform part of it, and the systemic racism with regard to police brutality. I wanted to bring up one other thing, like barring a complete reprogramming of our criminal justice system, which obviously needs to be done. What does it look like in the short term? Like, what looks good in the short term? Does body cameras, like mandatory body cameras, look like enough, or what needs to be done in the short term?
I think that's a heartbreak that our community is dealing with right now, because for centuries, at least decades, I know, probably centuries, it was always the officer's name against the victim. And there's just, nobody's going to believe you. The police officer said that. But then we started capturing these things on cameras because of cell phones, and the outcomes are not different. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a few here and there, but in the past we've been a few here and there. And so I think that's kind of the thing, like, well, body cameras are an excellent idea, and we have to have rules about that from both perspectives. A friend of mine said, you use the camera, but you're catching some people in their most vulnerable moments.
Yeah.
If you go to a domestic abuse situation, everybody doesn't necessarily want that on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
But when you come down to these situations where someone's killed and they're unarmed, and we need that tape to see what happened, how it happened, who did what when. But maybe we need more laws on. Maybe we have to access that. We definitely need cameras that can't be turned off and on.
Yeah, agreed there.
And they must always be in whatever position they decide is the best viewpoint for any interaction. And we really just have to train police officers differently. One, they need longer training. It should take much longer to become a police officer, someone who can decide life or death in a split second, than a nail technician.
That's true, but you can't train racism out of somebody.
Well, they can train it into you, so we definitely need different training. And I wish I had remembered the article. There was a police officer who was, sort of doing an expose of how they would approach black neighborhoods and how they're training. In the videos that they use for training, they use black people as the suspects.
Right.
And so if that's what you're trained, immediately, it's not a conscious thing. There's been a lot of shootings that I could say that officer didn't wake up and say, I'm just going to kill a black person today.
Right, but
the racism is so ingrained that they're triggered immediately when they see black skin.
That's true, and with regard to, like, using black bodies as target, target, uh,
Yeah, and they were using people
replicating a
that had.
target. Yeah, and with regard to that, I might ask, well, which started which? Like, which was the symptom here? Was it not? I mean, it it wasn't the police force that made them a bigot. It who put those there? Who made that the target? Obviously, it was somebody who had an underlying problem before they joined the police force. Like, this didn't come from the police force.
Well, I think old habits die hard, and I mean, we can take this all the way back to slavery. If you always think, if you've been trained to think that a certain group of people are lesser,
Hmm.
then the next generation understands that and doesn't mind treating them bad. And then maybe not even thinking about it or saying this is going to be the people that we're going to encounter on the street, uses the picture of someone who's already been through the system or random black person, and then it just becomes habit. And that's the most insidious thing about racism is because it becomes habit.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you one other thing with regard to some of the debate. I don't know how much bantering you do back and forth with people on the ideological right on social media, uh, but but at any rate, I was one thing that gets brought up is so-called censorship. Censorship by in individual like subcultures and communities and everything, and claiming that they feel censored. And there are faux cases of that, and then there are like legitimate cases where censorship is employed, like such as when they barred Alex Jones from Twitter and Facebook and all of that, and then the left bust out in cheers, and then just like a week or two after it was predicted to happen, they immediately started going after leftist outlets with the same censorship, and things, these things tend to come back around for the left. That they
Right.
and like should with regard to that and identity politics combined, like what would you say if I was to ask, like, should Ben Shapiro be allowed to speak at Liberty University, for example, or you know Berkeley?
Well, I mean, the
Should Milo
university, like
Yiannopoulos be allowed
that,
to speak at Berkeley?
he should be giving the opportunity to vote to speak there. And if there's a large enough protest from the students who are paying to attend that university, if they don't want him there, that's democracy. And people get into, well, it's censorship. The school can rent a building somewhere else for the people who want to hear him. No one's stopping him from saying whatever he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
The school can allow him to still show up there, and then there's going to be protesters. And that's how our democracy works. But in regards to like these celebrity happenings, I'm very much a hold them all by the same, if this is the rule for one, this is going to be the rule for everyone. So if I'm going to call out Liam Neeson about what he said, I certainly should still have a problem with Elizabeth Warren when we find out that she did use Native American history or ethnicity to help her get into law school.
Right.
I
Right.
have to hope those. I mean, Liam seems more violent on the surface, but it's still that sort of that where you're just using those people to get ahead, to release your anger. It's not so different, and so I feel the same way about that. Roseanne said something bad, Kathy Griffin said something bad. They can both go. I mean, I'm really just not, mired in, well, but she's the no, because then you don't have morals, you have a team.
Yeah. Could I ask you one thing with regard to electoral politics? Like when identity politics is intersectional with an election, how do we how do we play that nuance right there with, like, say, a person of color or a member of the LGBTQ community running for office and being supposedly representative of their constituency while advocating for neoliberal policies and expecting us to vote for them on the basis of an identity without a substantive policy. You know what I mean? Something that's going to help the constituents.
Yeah, that's very problematic. And for me, um, equality in that situation is show me what you stand for. I don't care what color, what gender, what sexual orientation, any of that. If you're speaking my language, if you and I agree, and I mean, I don't think anyone's found a politician that they agree with everything 100%.
Right.
But if I can agree with most of what you're doing, if I can stand behind that, I don't care who you are. Now, I definitely feel like we need to have more representation in government, but I think the reason we're in some of the mess we're in now is because we have been swayed by having women say things instead of men, but they're saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
By having a black president say the same thing as a white president, it doesn't make the statement or the understanding any different.
Yeah.
It's just trying to pull in a different audience based on optics.
A different smokescreen.
Right. And I mean, to me, I certainly would love to see a black female president. You know, I'm just not. I would love to see that. I would love to see that.
So what would you think of a President Nina Turner then?
That would make my soul happy. That would make my soul happy. And right now, as far as what I've seen out there so far, she is the one that I think, as a black female president, that I could stand behind 100%.
Yeah.
And we may have our differences on 1 or 2% on a particular topic, but she would have my full support.
Yeah, and she might be a more of a uniter as well. More of a uniter even than Bernie Sanders is. And she's.
I feel like she's someone who is willing to talk to anyone. And for everything that I know about her,
Mm-hmm.
she will go wherever and she talks to everyone. She goes places where people don't, they don't like her because she's black and she's female. And she goes to those places because she's fighting for the rights of those people regardless of how they feel about her.
Yeah.
And that to me is an important thing, that she has a moral center. And that's what I'm looking for. I want someone who's compassionate and who understands the economic situation. And we've heard her tell her story about when she grew up. And someone who understands that and can operate from a point of compassion as opposed to, well, I got mine, you get yours, good luck.
Yeah. Right. All right. Well, I appreciate your time this evening.
This has been fun. I look forward to maybe having another chat.
Certainly. Absolutely.
I really appreciated the invitation.
Mm-hmm. You have a nice evening.
You too, Daniel. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye. And that was Miss Pamela Getz. I will provide a link in the description box below where you can find her on Twitter. Again, my name is Devin Jones. SparxTribune.org. That's Sparx, spell Sparx with an X, Tribune.org. And you have a nice evening. Thank you.